totally natural thing, and it's like very, very healthy. And it's beautiful. Like you're out there looking at the mountains all around and nature, like Tweety birds flying by while you're bathing. You're not sealed off in some little fiberglass cubicle.
G'day and welcome. This is the Hunting Repbulic Podcast. The podcast where we discuss all things hunting and outdoors. So if you love hunting, camping, fishing, hiking, bushwalking, four-wheel driving, or just being in the outdoors, then we reckon you've come to the right place. My name is Luke. I will be your host, and I can't wait to have you along for the journey. So please enjoy this edition of the Hunting Repbulic Podcast. G'day team, and welcome to the second edition of the Hunting Repbulic Podcast. I wanted to kick this podcast off by saying thank you to everybody who's had a listen, everybody who's made a comment, all the people who have liked and followed, people who have shared, and also to those guys out there who have their own podcasts, who have reached out and made contact. It's awesome to be in an industry or be in a field where everyone is just super supportive. It's super encouraging. It's really encouraging. And the first episode was a very interesting learning experience, a very steep learning curve. And some of the feedback we got has been taken on board. Quality of audio, volume has been readdressed and re-uploaded, and we hope the listening experience this time round will be much better. So, moving on to the second episode, the content of the podcast being hunting and outdoors. So we actually had an opportunity to take the direction of this episode in a slightly out of the box direction, you might say, with compared to the normal content that these sorts of podcasts have. So we had an opportunity to sit down with my mate Keith. Keith is, as you will learn, an adventure motorcyclist. He has travelled extensively, both in Australia and around the world, and he loves nothing more than loading up his bike and basically just heading out into wherever he needs to or wants to go. And we found that there were a lot of crossover parallels with regards to things like choices of gear, considerations for safety, planning, and all that sort of those things like how do you cook, what food do you take? We cover a bunch of that stuff and more. So we hope that whilst this isn't probably a typical hunting-focused episode, we think you'll find it really enjoyable. And Keith has a couple of pretty cool stories. He's got a lot of cool stories. He tells us a couple in this episode. And we had a really awesome time just sitting around the fire talking. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. So please sit back and have a good listen to episode 2 of the Hunting Repbulic Podcast. All right, welcome to the podcast, Keith.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So joining me on the podcast for this episode, I have my good mate Keith, the Hunting Repbulic, and as the topic is, or the I suppose you say the content is, we like to cover all sorts of things, hunting, outdoors, and as our intro mentions, camping and forward driving and that sort of thing. And got the opportunity this week to hang out with Keith, and Keith is my good Irish mate, who's a mad keen, what would you say, Keith? Adventure motorcyclist.
Yeah, a bit of everything, I suppose. Adventure
everything.
Motorcycling, travelling, anything that's not going to work every day, I guess.
So tell us a little bit about your background, Keith. You're obviously from Ireland, but you live in Australia now?
Yeah. What are we? I think 15 years this year I've been here. Came over for a...
And we let you stay here?
Yeah, reluctantly. Yeah, it took a while. It took a bit of convincing, but we got there in the end. But no, I came over for... There's actually a mate of mine, he grew up here. And he yeah, he rang me one day after I finished uni, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to go to Australia. You want to come?" I said, "Oh, well, I've got nothing else planned, so I'll come for a bit of a holiday, a couple of months, and then I'll come back." And 4.5 years, I just didn't leave.
You didn't leave. They
No.
didn't kick you out, and
No.
you decided to stay.
Yeah, just decided to stay. Got a bit of stable work for a while, and then did all the residency process and just stayed.
So
15
that
years.
was like post high school, post uni sort of thing. Or?
Yeah, post uni. Yeah.
Yep.
So a couple of months after I finished uni, so
Yep.
did a mechanical engineering degree, and then I was kind of just heading into the economic downturn, so it was a good time to get out of Europe, I think, and came over here, and there was still a fair bit of work going here, so it worked out well, and kind of made the most of it, I guess.
So did you work in that field when you first came over? What sort of things did you pick that up straight away? Or?
No, I did everything and anything when I came over first. I think my first job was a delivery driver for a disability support shop,
Oh, wow.
of all things.
Yep.
Doing deliveries, and this was pre like smartphone time, so I was doing it with a phone book with the map in it.
Goodness me.
So yeah, that was crazy. I think that's only less than just 15 years ago. But yeah, that was a bit different, and yeah, I did everything: brickies labourer, building site, industrial labouring. Yeah, I wasn't shy. I'd do anything, and did everything. But it afforded me a lot of opportunities, I guess.
And
A lot of different life experiences.
And with that in mind, were you sort of wanting to get into your area of study, or just sort of happy doing what you could do? Or?
Yeah, I was just happy, just kind of, in getting the different experiences, I suppose. And yeah, I eventually did end up getting into mining for a while. Did a couple of years out there working all over West Queensland, or central of West Queensland. And then, because of visa restrictions of all things, I ended up moving to Mackay and got another job there, and working for a I don't know if I'm allowed to mention names, but a very large
Go for your life.
very large tire company.
Yep.
And doing R&D engineering for them.
Yep.
And that was probably one of my best jobs, actually. I traveled all over the country, and all the way. Basically, Queensland was my home state, but I went to the Northern Territory, New South Wales, all over the place. It was a great job, but then relationship. We decided we wanted to go traveling. I wanted to go home, see my family. So we ended up spending nearly 2 years on the road, traveling between here and Europe.
Wow.
So that was a long old stint.
And as I mentioned before, we I say the genre of the podcast is about hunting and outdoors and stuff, and Hunter, but
Yeah.
you I know you love your motorcycles, your adventure tours and stuff like that, and you've got a couple,
Yeah.
and you've done some pretty bloody wild things in my books as far as that's concerned. What would be your favourite? Your favourite trip, or what? Give us one example of a crazy memorable incident. I know you've had a few.
Yeah, there's been a few, all right. I guess probably a bit of context for this one. It would be a road from Kathmandu, Nepal road from Kathmandu to Ireland, in the space of about 3.5 months, I think it was. So all through the Central Asia and then Middle East, up to Eastern Europe and across Europe. And we were riding along. We're in Iran, I think, at this stage. And riding along and just kind of in your own helmet, just relaxing and, just in your own little headspace. And sometimes you just see something out of your peripheral. You just kind of, something's happening and you're not sure what, but this is all obviously happening very quickly, but something's happening and you can't quite process it. And I looked over and there's a car next to me, and we were tipping along. The road was pretty good, so we were probably doing 100 plus. And I looked over and there's this car and the window's open and the passenger's hanging out the window trying to give me a piece of fruit at 100k an hour. And it's one of those
Trying
things.
to sell you fruit.
No, just trying to give it to me. It was a gift.
It was a gift.
it's one of those kind of things that you think, this wouldn't happen in Australia. And I don't know why I needed a piece of fruit at 100k an hour, but I got one.
You took the fruit?
Yeah, I took it, yeah.
What fruit was it? Do you remember?
I think it was a mandarin or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. But and that was a pretty common occurrence. That was like we'd stop in a town and we had to stop stopping in bigger towns, and we'd try and stop in smaller places just to reduce the crowds, basically. Because at the time when we travelled through, we were the first kind of Western motorcycles, I suppose you'd say, that have come through in at least a year or more, because they had a bit of a restriction for a little while on bigger motorcycles. So they, we would draw a crowd everywhere we stopped. So we decided, that's another incident, we decided to stop in smaller places. And we pulled up at this, we were in the middle of nowhere, pulled up at this shop, and there was a shop and there was a house, nothing else around. And we pulled up and went into the shop, bought some water and drinks and whatever we needed. And we instantly, there was a group of young kids pulled up on scooters, and they saw us and they started doing wheelies and stoppies and there'd be 2 or 3 of them on the bike just doing tricks and stuff. And that was good entertainment. So there was a bit of commotion happening outside, and the house that was next to the shop, the door opened, and this man walks out and he's just got a towel around his waist, and he's looked out at us, not an unfriendly look, but just had a look at us, kind of, what's going on out here. Shut the door again. We thought, he's had a look, he knows what's happening. So he opens the door again, and he hands out a bowl of dates. So I'm talking a bowl of dates, like a massive bowl of them. Oh, sorry, cherries it was, not dates, it was cherries. Hands us this massive bowl of cherries, and we're kind of standing there with this bowl of cherries, like, what are we going to do with this? And he just didn't say a word, didn't say or do anything, handed us the bowl of cherries and shut the door. So we're just standing there with a bowl of cherries. So we had a lot of cherries. And,
was it a gift, or you give to the kids?
Yeah, it was just a gift. It was just, you're travelling through, here's a bowl of cherries. What we needed, apparently.
So you're getting fruit given to you at 100 kilometres an hour on a bike, and bowls of cherries given to you at random shops along the way.
And then we were left with the bowl, and what are you going to do with a bowl on a motorbike? So
that was in, would you say Iran?
Iran, yeah.
And so what sort of? I know you've got a few bikes.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to say in front of your partner here how many you have? Does she know?
Only the 2. Only the 2. So one lives in Ireland now, and the other one's in the shed here. It's my commuter everyday bike.
And what's that one, mate?
Both the same. They're identical DR650 Suzukis. So one's black and one's white. They're both 2011. Totally by coincidence. They almost identical specs. So.
And how many? When did you pick up the one you've got here? How many miles have you done on it?
Oh, my current one, I think I picked it up with about 10,000 on it, and I think I've got 45 on it now.
Yep. So
just commuting miles. I've done a few little trips with it. I went out to, did Bundaberg to Cameron Corner via Nindagully pub. Went to Cameron Corner and then went cross country up to Strzelecki Desert and then up to Batutha.
Wow.
Just did a week trip, so covered some Ks. And
would most of your trips be solo, or do you go with one other person or a group, or what do you prefer? It
depends. Yeah, I've done a few group rides, and of late I just kind of that one was just sporadic. I just needed a bit of a week off, so I had a bit of time. Work was quiet, so I just packed up and went. I had 2 weeks off, but I ended up on that trip, I had 2 weeks, and after about 4 days, I was like, I'm good. I'm done now. I'm happy to head home. So I turned around and came back.
I missed my girl.
So when you go on a trip like that, do you, especially if you're going with yourself or just one other person, you've obviously got some significant, considerations with regards to mechanical breakdowns and reliability and safety and planning and what sort of prep do you do, either mechanically or like EPIRB type things, or what do you do with that? Because in the big scheme of things, for most people I suppose, listening to this podcast with hunting in mind and being in the outdoors and that sort of stuff, then, you know, like when I go myself or even with just if I'm with one other person, but it's, you know, one foot in front of the other is about safety. Do I take this step? Is it a safe step to take? Literally, in certain circumstances where, you know, you need to consider that because you're extremely remote, and or, you know, if you're dealing with something like wild pigs or whatever that are, you know, known for being dangerous to hunters in certain circumstances, that's a huge consideration. So, you know, what sort of stuff do you do in that regard?
Yeah, it's funny how that's kind of changed. I know when I first started riding, like when I first learned, especially when I first started riding, I ride on my own. I just go places on my own, which now, looking back as a more responsible adult, I guess it was probably not the wisest decision, but things happened and I survived, so it was all good. But yeah, now definitely the safety aspect has come in, especially solo. You've got a lot more to think about. I do carry, I've only just bought it recently, I do carry an EPIRB, obviously for emergencies, and I did a lot of research and I haven't bought one yet, but I probably will look at either a Garmin InReach or a Zoleo, or however you say it, communicator, just for that emergencies, because you obviously don't want to set off an EPIRB if you've just got a mechanical, but you know, a lot of the places you go, there's not a lot of phone reception out there. Even though it has improved, it's vastly improved over what it used to be, but you know, a lot of the remote stuff, you are remote. There is, if you can't fix it, it's a long walk. So yeah, it's definitely a consideration now. Things have changed, but it's I think it's an essential, really. Like, it's the way I look at it, it's more of avoiding you being an inconvenience than anything else. Because I personally would feel horrible. Like I said, setting off an EPIRB for a mechanical would be, you know, you're activating a lot of resources for something which isn't really an emergency. Like, it's an emergency, but it's not life or death.
That's it. And you know, I can speak from my side of the coin, I suppose, as someone who works in emergency services, that, you know, I can understand that perspective, but at the same time, I can say I understand the perspective that if it's not set off or those mechanical issues can become life-threatening, obviously, you know, and as you know, out in the middle of the outback, and that's that awareness thing where you go, okay, well, it's mechanical for now, but in 48 hours, it's life or death. You know?
That's it, yeah. How long's my water going to last?
Yeah, exactly.
You can be a long way from help out there, for sure.
So have you had any particular, you know, I don't think I've heard you saying anything about having to obviously set off an EPIRB as such, but have you ever had anything crop up that sort of got you a bit concerned?
Not so much, no. Like, I tend to, like, even when I do sporadic trips like that, I tend to keep the bike pretty well maintained, and the DR is simple and reliable, I guess you would say. It's a design that hasn't changed for a very long time, and that's massively down to the fact that it is just a simple design. So I tend to just do all the basic mechanicals, make sure it's right before I leave, and you know, touch wood, never had a problem in that. You know, never had a problem in a situation where I couldn't fix it.
Yep.
But we have had, like, I've gone on trips. We rode from friends of mine went from Sunny Coast. I went from Bundy to Alice Springs out the Plenty Highway, and one of those things, again, it's, you know, you look back at it and think, you know, that could have gone very differently. Got to the end of this side of the Plenty Highway, and only just got on the dirt, and I saw this road train coming, and that road is just bull dust, and you know, you see a road train, you get off the road because that road train's not stopping, especially for you on a bike. And I'd pulled over to the edge of the road, we would say, and I kind of thought, I wouldn't mind going a bit further just to get away. And as soon as I did it, I thought that was the wrong decision. And I hit a patch of bull dust, and I wasn't going especially fast. I was probably doing maybe 60k, 70k an hour. And I hit this bull dust, and front wheel just went in, tucked straight over the handlebars, head first. Bike followed me, end over end. And I just, ended up just sitting on the ground, dust everywhere. And, it's that real nice, fine, powdery dust that just gets into everything. And I just remember sitting on the ground going, well, that was a bad decision. I really should have just stayed on my line.
Pretty lucky.
Yeah, I didn't really need to get this far off the road. But and then, of course, the road train went past and added to my dust. But yeah, that, again, that comes down to a second decision. Like, it's... I could have gone very differently. Obviously there's big repercussions to landing on your head. Luckily, there's not much in mine, so it wasn't so much of an issue. But
I won't say anything about being Irish. But
yeah, it helps. But yeah, things like that can happen. And that's, I was in a group at that stage, and we had a 4-wheel drive with us, and there was doctors and nurses in that group, and obviously didn't need them, but could have very well have needed them. And then again on that same trip, one of our other mates, when we got to Alice, it was during the Fink Desert race, and we split up to go do different things. I went down to Uluru, and he followed the Fink down the Fink track, and he was riding down, and I think he might have been moving a little bit, but that happens. And he came over a bit of a crest, and on the other side of the crest was a big hole that he didn't know was there. And he did a very similar thing, but I think probably a lot more violently. And he ended up breaking, I think broke his arm in a couple of places, wrote the bike off. Bike was a complete write-off. There was bits of bike everywhere.
Yep.
And again, comes down to a bit of luck, I think, because he had no EPIRB with him at the time. And but he still had phone reception, just. So there was a few people around, so they gave him a hand, got him together, got him off the track. And he managed to get on the phone to a mate of his who happened to be in Alice for the race and flies helicopters.
Oh, nice.
So he organised his own evac. So he flew him back to the hospital, got him sorted out, and then obviously ended up flying home from there. So things like that can happen, but it happened where it happened, and he was able to get help very quickly. But that could also have gone the other way. If you're in a more remote spot, it's not in the ideal situation.
Oh, 100%. So, in that regard, like, you obviously, like, these sorts of trips, these sorts of rides, it's you're on a bike. Do you have panniers, or you just carry a big backpack, or how do you ride?
I do. I've tried a few different systems. I prefer soft bags, so I've done the two main setups I use. If I'm just doing a weekender, I've got just a throw over bag, which is like a horseshoe shaped bag that just sits over the back seat. Yep. And I strap on. That's just,
it's like saddlebags across a horse, literally.
Basically, exactly the same thing. And that's just, tent, sleeping bag, bit of food, a t-shirt, nothing serious. And then I don't actually, I suppose a bit of experience comes into it too. I don't carry as much as I used to. Even on longer trips now, like I'm probably what we'd say minimalist. 2 t-shirts, 2 pairs of jocks, a couple of pairs of socks. Don't overthink it, don't overpack it, because you don't want to carry it. It's the more weight in the bike, the less fun it is, really. Yep. I use a 2. On my Australian bike, I've got Andy straps, which are an Australian-made canvas pannier. So one on either side, they're about 30 litres each. And then I try to avoid a top bag, but sometimes I'll bring a small waterproof duffel just on top, just for, it's just essential day-to-day stuff like food, and if I'm carrying a bit more water, a bit more fuel. Because I've got a safari tank, so I've got about 36 litres in the front, and then I've got a couple of sets of different fuel bladders as well. So
yep. And so, like, what do you take for sleeping gear? There's a proponent of people who hunt that like to do the alpine and the backpack hunting, and I've done a few myself, and they have been some of the more memorable trips I've done, where you load up for a week and off you go. So you've got to consider all the weight issues and stuff, as you just mentioned. Yep. What sort of sleeping kit do you take with you?
I've got a few different setups. So my first ever motorbike camping trip, I used to take a swag.
Wow.
Which it worked. Like, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but they're not small either.
Exactly. Yeah.
And not light. But for a weekender it'll do the job, but I don't think I've had it out for years now. So yeah, most of the time I've got bivy bags as well. I don't know. They're okay. Bivy bags are good for, you know, a night under a tarp. It's okay, but it's not for me. Anyway, I find it a bit too restrictive. It's not as comfortable. And I find too, like as you get older, I like a good night's sleep, especially if you're going to do some big Ks and you need your concentration up. So,
Sure.
well, my go-to at the moment is I've got a hiking tent, basically a lightweight 2-man tent, North Face. And no, I'm not a big spender. I picked it up on a clearance sale, so I paid very little for it. But
Nice.
it's a brilliant tent. Like it's one of the few things in life, if you do spend money on it,
Definitely.
it's worth it. Like
Yep.
I've had that tent for probably going on 5 or 6 years, and it's been literally around the world. You know, the only thing that's ever failed on it is the elastics and the poles gave away. So a trip to Bunnings fixed that. So yeah, the North Face tent. I was using a Sea to Summit mat, but I'm now upgraded to a, name has escaped me now, but it's a big plush insulated mat, and have to have insulated. I'm a very cold sleeper, so
Yeah, I can identify with that.
yeah, I've tried all different air mattresses and self-inflating mats and everything else, and I actually prefer this over my bed at home. It is that comfortable.
Ooh.
I'll have to get the name for you because I can't remember off the top of my head now, but
You said the bed at home, not the company at home. Hey?
it's 50-50. But yeah, the mat's essential, and then good sleeping bag.
So for those people listening to the podcast, we're hanging out around the fire tonight and dodging a bit of smoke and whatnot, having a nice wine and a drink, but sitting alongside of us being nicely quiet, which is a real struggle.
Yeah, it's a shock.
Are our two partners.
So very unusual.
So they're doing very well, and it's very much appreciated. So it's a
We're
rare.
learning lots of secrets.
It's a rarity, and yeah, Keith might have got an elbow in the ribs just before. So, but
Broken other rib.
no, I can identify with that, Keith. I've got a Vango Four Seasons tent that I bought off a friend who sort of, for whatever different reasons, moved it on there a long time ago now, and as I touched on before, I've done a number of backpack hunts myself, and you know, it's a one-man tent, so you know, enough room for yourself, a pair of boots, and that's about it really. But you know, having said that, I can remember using that down in Stanthorpe and the Tenterfield area in the middle of winter, sitting up and the frost from the condensation inside the tent falling off onto my head as I sat up in the morning and opening the tent, and my bow with arrows in it sitting outside covered in frost and that sort of thing, and you know, worth their absolute weight in gold. And even though that weight's not much, you know, the price of gold, you can certainly appreciate what they are worth. And
I find as well too, it's, you can get away with, say, like bivy bag or swag for a night or two, but if you're in it for week on, week in, just day in, day out, having that tent, even though, it may only be one person, it gives you just that, it's your home, like that's you are living in it. You can wake up in the morning, and if it's raining outside, you can still sit up. You can, awkwardly get your clothes on. It
get
just
your
gives you that
on and
bit more comfort that you don't, you won't have it in. Definitely won't have it in a bivy bag.
Yeah. So the other thing I also have, the same brand actually, Vango, is it's a minus 15 rated down sleeping bag.
Yep.
And again, I absolutely identify with being a cold frog.
Yep.
I've mentioned in a previous podcast of hunting trips I've done down to Wellington, south of Dubbo there, and I've been there in winter, and as a central Queenslander, yes, I've lived in Switzerland, but as a central Queenslander, I can tell you the 4 layers plus the down sleeping bag plus the swag just made me comfortable at night. And the boys used to laugh at me, the dance I'd do in the morning, getting out of all that gear and into my hunting gear for the day.
Yeah, like the Michelin.
Can't underrate a good tent or swag system and a good sleeping bag.
100%, yeah.
So how do you go with with like your cooking gear? You know, did you take a jet boil or something like that?
I've actually got, probably last year I picked up it's a jet boil knockoff. It was in Kmart of all things.
Yeah, nice.
And it might have been $50, I think. And it is like, it's intense. Like it's not really a cooker. It's just a boiled water, very, very quickly system. But it does the job.
Yep.
Previous to that, I actually had a Soto, which is a Japanese brand. It's actually a petrol stove, which is handy when you're on the bike because you can obviously plentiful supply of petrol.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a pretty magic bit of kit. It's, again, picked it up on special, and it's been around the world and never had an issue with it. Never had to clean it. Put some fuel in it, pump it up, and away you go. And infinitely adjustable, so you can actually cook on it. It's not just a boiling water system.
Yep.
But yeah, great bit of kit. But even though I was surprised with the Kmart one, it works, you know, just as well as a jet boil. Like you're talking, I think probably 4 minutes or something to boil a litre of water.
And do you sort of do you mostly take sort of freeze dried stuff, or what do you prefer? What would be your luxury? If you know, you got to take something that you know, like a snack at night, or what's your luxury?
It's all a luxury, isn't it? It's better than sleeping on the ground.
Yeah.
No, I would say probably the sleep system would be my luxury. I do love my food, but I can survive a night or two without food. But yeah, the sleep system for sure. I've invested quite a bit of money into my various different sleep systems until I found this one that works well for me.
Yep.
And like you said, the down sleeping bag, I use a climate down bag. I think it's rated to -20 or something.
Oh, I love your work.
And it's just, it's
toasty.
Oh yeah, like you get too hot, you end up having to kick a leg out.
Oh, that's you can handle being too hot, eh?
Oh,
you
for sure.
Can't sleep if you're too cold.
It's that chill, that hour before dawn when the temperature really drops, and you just tuck yourself into that down sleeping bag, and you don't care.
Yeah.
You can sleep on.
And you got to admit though, you do have a rather full head of hair, unlike I do. So the old noggin gets very cold at night.
Oh,
so
yeah, you need the beanie as well.
A bit of a beanie in the hood doesn't go astray.
Yeah, you gotta have it.
And what's your what is it that drags you out there? You know, like a lot of people identify with hunting and fishing and that sort of stuff, and they love. You know, like, I know a lot of bow hunters, for example, will say they just like a bushwalk with a bow. You know, they love, irrespective of shooting animals or the actual hunting aspect, they love being out there in nature and experiencing that. What is it that drives you for your adventure rides?
I guess it's probably a bit of both of those things. Like it's, I just love getting out and about. I like being out exploring. I like the freedom. I like just being able to go, get up in the morning, and go, right, I'm going this direction, and that's the direction I'm going. And it just, the freedom I think a bike offers me over, say, a four-wheel drive. Obviously, a four-wheel drive, you could probably live a bit more luxury, but I quite like just having the basics. There's something very freeing about just having what you need, no more, no less. You know, it's a simple, I guess it goes back to like almost a basic existence where, you know, although we're living well with our tents and our down sleeping bags and whatnot, it's an existence where day to day you just need fuel, food, water, you know, a bit of flat ground to put your tent up on. You know, it's just simple. You minimal bells and whistles, and I guess it's a bit of an escape too. Like you kind of, for me in a way, like you head west west from us on the East Coast. You head out into the centre and you throw up your tent, and there's not another person within sight, and you're sitting there, you know, preferably with a fire on, and you look up and you see that massive sky full of stars. There's no light pollution, there's no sound pollution. You know, it's a pretty magical experience when you get out west. Like
100%.
There's not many stars. Like I've seen a few starry skies, but there's not many stars that bright. It's a special place.
Same, yeah. I think a lot of hunters can identify with that. You know, I've certainly been to places and walked to gullies and creek lines and stuff, and you know, been immersed in that and thinking to myself that, you know, like, I wonder if anyone's walked it before, and I wonder when that was, if it was at all. Yep. You know, and walking around the bends in certain creeks, or, you know, up mountains and hills and gullies, or across plateaus and down the other side and that sort of stuff, and you sort of think, well, you know, I walk down this gully and, you know, see deer and goats and pigs and whatever, and have they ever seen someone before?
Yeah,
You know,
I think
that
it's
same
similar,
sort of thing.
a similar kind of thing. You kind of think, how many people have been here before? There's a lot of places out there where it would be fairly minimal. Like it'd be, it's not a lot of traffic out there in a lot of the places, but it's just getting, it's getting busier and busier now too. Like it's become such a big pastime, I guess. Like people are traveling more, they're getting out more, and it's great. Like it's good to see. It gives the communities a bit of traffic and a bit of income, and there's a lot of pubs out there. I've noticed on the last trip last year, there's a lot of pubs closing down, and it can't get staff. They just, overheads become too much, and there's just not enough traffic. There's not enough people getting out there even still, because if you're not on that main tourist drag, you're not going to get your grey nomads, and if you're not Cape York or the Simpson Desert, then you're not going to get four-wheel driving enthusiasts. So kind of my partner sometimes kind of jokes that I do basically a glorified pub crawl, but
you are Irishman.
Well, yeah, gotta keep up the stereotype. But,
you can't get sober.
No, you gotta stay drunk most of the time. But I do like to try and visit a lot of the places if I can, and even if you just go in and buy a drink or buy something to eat, and just try and contribute a bit, because a lot of those people are doing it tough out there. There's
absolutely,
it's a tough existence. Like there's some people living out there. Like I think it was the pub, might have been at Cameron Corner or just this side of Cameron Corner, Nakondra maybe, and I stopped there for the night and chatting to the publican, and lovely people, nice food, and got up the next morning. I was getting fuel before I left and talking to the lady, and she said, oh, it's good, there's a few people coming through, and I said, oh, how busy does it get in summertime? And she just looked at me like I had two heads. Like she said, yeah, we don't get a lot of traffic out here in summertime. I said,
so hot.
I said, are you still, you're still out here? And so, oh yeah, we stay here year round.
Wow. I
said, and how hot are we talking? He said, oh, it'll get 50 degrees out here. I was like, oh, that's not a pleasant existence. And she said, yeah, like, you might not, you get trucks coming through occasionally, but that's about all you see. It's like, that's a tough life. That's not a life a lot of people will choose. It's you got to feel for those people. And so I don't mind stopping there and spending a bit of money.
Absolutely. And it's one of the, interesting things in this day and age, with a lot of pressure on the pastime of hunting, and in some aspects too, like four-wheel driving, and some of the bad press that it gets as well. Yeah. But the actual the economic value it has to those smaller towns where like myself and my trips out to Mara there, where I grew up as a kid and worked later on in my professional life. Going to the bottle-o, going to the servo, going to the IGA, the bakery, whatever it is.
Yep.
You're bringing dollars from somewhere else and injecting into that community.
Yep.
And like apart from the time and the experience catching up with the my friend who owns the property out there, and that social aspect as well, but. Just the dollars that communities get from people, doing these, having these pastimes. Aside from the grey nomads, the places that the grey nomads don't necessarily go to or stop at.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. It doesn't get mentioned enough, I don't think, how much they benefit from it economically. Yeah.
Plus, and I guess the opposite side of the grey nomad thing now. I think a lot of the grey nomads are struggling because the price of fuel and everything is hurting them, and a lot of them would only be on pensions or self-funded. So I've noticed a lot of the forums now that they're not spending the money that they used to. They don't stop in as many caravan parks and things like that. So they're free camping more, which they're shopping and cooking themselves instead of going to the pubs. And obviously that doesn't not every one of them, but the numbers do add up for those small country pubs. And I was actually the Ninnagully pub, which it was one of those weird coincidences in life. When I planned the trip, which was only probably a week before I left, I was talking to our neighbour and said to the neighbour, I'm going to go to the Nindagully pub. And they said, oh, I think our friend Jack knows someone that works there. So I messaged my, or, friend Jack, a mutual friend, and I said, Jack, do you know someone at the Nindagully pub? And he said, yeah, I do. I went to school with a guy that I think his dad owns it or something. And he said, oh, if you go there, just mention my name and see if they know him.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I went in, had a few drinks and had my dinner, and you actually order your dinner and then you go out and collect it from the kitchen.
Yep.
And then I brought my plate back and I said, oh, just by any chance, you know Jack? And the guy looked at me he's looking at me, he's like, yeah, I went to school with him. And I'm like, oh, you Jack, you went to school with Jack, you know Jack? He's like, oh yeah. And turns out he actually owns the pub.
Wow.
So that ended up being a bit of a long night because he said, oh, just wait until I finish in the kitchen. I've got a few meals to cook because I was quite busy. But it was an interesting insight talking to him because obviously being a publican out there, he kind of knows all the ins and outs. And he said it's tough. Like he said, you'll get people, and Nindagully's great because it's got a lovely river out the front and quite a nice camping area. It's not on his land. It's I think council land technically, and there's a toilet and that. But he provides toilets and showers at the pub, which is like a gold coin donation type situation. And he said people won't even give you a gold coin. And he said the gold coin's not going to me. He said I give it all to the Royal Flying Doctors.
Wow.
Or whatever charity he's collecting for at the time. And he said people don't even do that. He says, you're providing hot water, you're providing water, which is a big resource in itself out there.
Absolutely.
Electricity, all the rest of it goes into it, cleaning. And he said, people are, I guess, that tight that they don't even pay for that, which is a bit sad, a pub, remote pub, well, semi-remote pub, I guess, like that people aren't even going to spend that money. Like, go in and buy a drink, like, try and give something back.
Something, yeah. It's interesting you talk about that experience with the I call it the small world experience.
Yeah, 6 degrees of separation.
On the first podcast that we started with, I was talking to you about it earlier where we went hunting with my friend Barry and his employee. Now, we talked about it on the podcast. Barry's, I like to give him a slight dig in the ribs, getting on, and he's almost 50. and his employee Dave, who came along as well, his friend is 26. Now, when we were sort of communicating through our Facebook chat and stuff to line up the times and the dates and everything for the hunt, and Barry added Dave into the group after he sort of said, oh, look, is it all right if Dave comes along? And I said, okay, yeah, of course it is, mate, absolutely. And did a bit of a Facebook stalk, and turns out he actually went to school with two colleagues that work with me at the station that I work at.
There you go.
And a couple of young lads. And I say young lads because I think the eldest is only 26 and his brother's only 23. They just happen to work at the same station as I do. And awesome lads, top blokes to work with. But just they're from a small rural town, and just a real odd small world experience of connections through the pastime, and I've had all sorts of strangely bizarre experiences like that with the pastime over many years.
Yes, for
and
sure.
it just adds value to the whole thing and layers to it as well.
Yeah, well, it just shows us. Yeah, it is a small world after all. We're all connected somehow.
But speaking of small worlds, you've seen a hell of a lot of it.
Yeah.
So at last count, or do you have a count? How many countries have you been to?
We have tried to count.
37.
We're close. I think I'm close to the 70 mark.
70.
Yeah, 70. Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of hard to count because we were in bed one Sunday morning it was, and partner said, "Oh, you should actually figure out how many countries so you can tell the story properly."
Well, use your chance. Use your chance.
So she downloaded 2 apps which are supposed to be able to list all the countries. And we managed to get 2 different answers on the apps, so I'm not sure if I trust the apps.
Or is it just you can't count?
Yeah, that's it. I ran out of fingers.
Because it's a bit hard this day and age. You don't get passport stamps in a lot of the countries either, especially Europe and that.
I've got a few interesting stamps on my passport, right? But I haven't got them all.
And where have you been once that you want to go back to?
Oh, I don't know. That's always a hard question. It's like asking, where's your favourite place?
I didn't ask that though.
yeah, luckily, because I don't have an answer for that either. But no, I think I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and it was actually, I don't know, but a bit of an aside, but it was actually at a time, it was just after the Arab Spring, which is where a lot of a few of the Arabian countries had their uprisings, and we decided the Middle East was a good place to go at the time for some reason.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It's a logical decision. It was good because there was very few tourists around, for a reason. But we had the place to ourselves. But no, we were lucky. We got some great experiences out of it. I think Lebanon's probably one of the places that I would probably go back to. And it comes down, it's like we were just saying, you know, the 6 degrees of separation. It's a small world. It becomes the people that you meet. Like we went to Lebanon, we were in Jordan, and we wanted to go. We kind of just had a little bit of time. We had something booked in Egypt, and we kind of spent a little bit of time in Jordan at that stage. And we said, oh, we should go somewhere else. And we basically had a look on the map and said, oh, we can't really go to Israel because we were worried about getting a stamp, because you get a stamp in your passport from Israel, it eliminates you from a few different countries. So we said, oh, we'll give.
You just think of sneaking over the border to Israel?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So we decided to just jumped on, like, it was a very 40-minute flight or an hour flight or something. It was very short to Lebanon. And like growing up in Europe, Lebanon to me was basically at war the whole time. So it was going to be an experience. And yeah, we got there, and like it's a massively contrasting city. It's kind of hard. Like the way I explained it to people is, I walked down the street and the shops would be like Gucci and Armani and all these crazy brands, and you'll have there'll be like a Ferrari and a Lamborghini drive down the street, and then a tank will drive down the street behind them. And it's just there's armed soldiers around on every corner, and
what do you call it? The cognitive dissonance. You're trying to rationalise that in your brain.
Like these two things shouldn't be on the same street. It's a very interesting country. But again, it came down to the people. We end up meeting a local guy who we befriended, and he was an engineer. He was a young engineer. I think he might have been still studying at the time. And he kind of reluctantly met up with us. We used to couch surf, which was a website that you kind of meet local people and you can stay with them if they've got room, or you can just
like Airbnb for backpackers.
Basically, yeah. It was great back in the day. I think it's monetized now, so it's not so good. But we met some great people through that, and we met up with him, and you could tell he was a bit worried. We met in a very public place, and he looked at us from a distance before he approached. It was kind of like hunting. And he eventually kind of worked up the courage, and he came over, and first thing he did was apologise for his English, which was probably better than ours. And
again, you're Irish, but I wasn't going to say so.
Well, it's a new language for us too. But yeah, he was a great guy. He still is a great guy. I'm still friends with him now, and that's probably. What's that? Probably 14, 15 years ago as well.
That's phenomenal.
And so I've got a whole list of stories for that country, but he became our tour guide and our friend. And I'll tell you a very quick story. Him and his friend kind of basically tour guided us around the country, and he just two young guys. They were mechanical engineer students, and I just finished my mechanical engineering pretty much. So so we're getting along pretty well, and just took us everywhere we wanted to go, and amazing places that locals would take people, but as a tourist you would never in a million years get to. And
Sounds good.
We went and met his parents, and his dad was kind of a bit suspicious of us, and he kept apologizing for his mum. He said, "Oh, mum doesn't speak English, and don't bother talking to mum," kind of thing, which we thought was a bit strange. And his mum was cooking us this food, like all homemade, amazing food. And he went out. He was like, went out. I don't know if to use the phone or something. And she turned around in the most perfect English, accented, clipped English, and said, "I can actually speak English perfectly. I was an English teacher. He just keeps saying that to annoy me."
Wow, that's funny.
It was, just lovely people. And then his dad was actually a journalist. And I think that was probably part of a suspicion of us.
Yeah.
And they took us for a drive, and we said, we're heading up to, there's a town right on the border with Syria. And Syria at the time was in full-on war. And so we drove up and looked at a few different tourist sites along the way. And I don't know if a lot of your listeners would have driven in the Middle East, but speed limits are very much optional. And seatbelts are also very optional. So it didn't take us long to get there. And then we got there and we were pretty much, I would say probably within maybe 10, 15K of the city. And their phone started ringing. And he answered it and he's having a good old chat. And he said, "Oh, that was my dad." And we're like, "Okay." And he said, "Oh, he just heard from a friend of his that there's a bit of action happening on the streets and that maybe we shouldn't go into the city." And what do you mean action? He goes, "Oh, apparently some people have come across the border and there's a bit of a battle happening." And we said, "Oh, a battle?" And he goes, yeah, just soldiers just having a bit of a shootout." And we're like, "Okay, maybe we shouldn't go in." He said, "Oh, we'll probably be okay." Well, actually, we'd be okay. We don't know if you'd be okay. And I said, "Yeah, well, we might give it a miss then." He said, "Oh, we'll go and have a look." So we drove up this hill outside the city so we could see kind of down into the city. And it was still at a decent, like a very safe distance, but we could see, tanks and APCs and people with guns.
No Ferraris and tanks?
No, there was no.
Okay.
Yeah, the Ferraris I think were parked up for this event. But yeah, there was basically a full-on battle raging. So yeah, we said, "Yeah, we'll give that a miss. We might go somewhere else today."
I'd pass on that one.
But yeah, there's a few different interesting stories from Lebanon, but I'd love to go back. It's a beautiful place.
So what would be, you say, your worst experience? Not necessarily like cultural-wise or whatever, but, mechanical or emergency or, like when you look at something you go, that was just, I could put my hand up and say, for example, it bloody rained all day, it rained all night, or rah, or whatever, like what?
Oh, yeah.
Like a motorbike leaves you pretty exposed to the elements, for example, and listeners haven't really heard about my curse. If I put up a tent of any fashion, it will rain.
Rain was coming.
If I'm not in something that's more solid or as solid as a caravan or worse, it will rain. And I've had people doubt me on that. My wife has doubted me on that when she first met me. She now knows full well.
She's learned.
That without doubt, and the same goes for my brother and my father and my son, any of the people with the male gene in my family, get rained on if we camp.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I think about hunting and I think about swags or anything like that, rest assured I'm planning for it to be a torrential downpour, irrespective of what, the weatherman says. So, have you had any experiences where you've just gone, this is just the absolute shits?
Oh, I suppose, you always try and delete the bad memories from your mind, but there's certain things.
But we learn from them, don't we?
Yeah, well, you hope so, yeah. Well, you'd hope so, yeah, but sometimes
I learned
you
to be
don't.
prepared for rain.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing by the sounds of it.
You're just thinking you're not ever going to come camping with me, right?
Well, if I do, I'll just go a bit further away.
I'm sitting there thinking that.
I know. Weather-wise, I've had a few different, especially on that trip where we were pretty much backpacking then. So you can't pack everything when you're carrying it on your back. And it was in Jordan. I think that's why we went to Lebanon, because it was middle of winter in Jordan, which you think in the desert it wouldn't be so bad, but if you've been in the desert, it gets bloody cold.
Absolutely freezing overnight.
And yes, literally freezing in this case. We went up to a place called Karak. There's a castle there, and it's kind of slightly elevated, and a beautiful place, like old ancient city, and got this I suppose like glamping, I would say, accommodation. And we thought it was strange there was no one else there. And we checked in and did all that, and really cool, like old stone rooms. And as the evening wore on, the temperature just dropped and dropped and dropped. And I ended up, I actually just thought of another story I'll come back to, but I ended up, weather related also, I ended up wearing everything I owned. If I could have got the backpack on me somehow, I would have worn that as well. It was absolutely freezing. It's probably the coldest I've ever been, and I've been to minus 35, minus 40, and I wasn't even close to as cold as I was then.
Wow.
Just because, and again, it transfers across to hunting and general outdoor stuff. If you're dressed badly, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what we were. We were not prepared for that. Like we'd been in basically sunshine and nice weather for months at this stage, and we were not acclimatized. And it's that kind of cold where it's not cold enough to be frozen yet. So it was snowing, but it was still damp.
Yep.
and it just gets into you. It
Everything
just soaks into every
soaks
part
in.
of you, and it was just miserable.
Yeah, I lived that in Shanghai one
Yes.
year where I think I worked out we didn't actually see the sun for 2 months, and
Yeah.
it was between 2 and about 5 degrees,
Yep.
and you just got so soaked with the cold.
Yep. And then as someone who now lives in a very sunny country, you miss the sun.
Mm-hmm.
You realize when you haven't seen it for a while that you actually
Absolutely.
miss it. I don't know how I survived 21 years in Ireland. But the other story about being cold was I flew back to Ireland at Christmas time for a wedding, and I'd known about the wedding for a very long time, but for some reason in my head I just decided not to book a flight. And so last minute I said, it was my sister's wedding, so I had to go. So I said, I better book a flight then. And I looked for flights, and Christmas time is not a good time to fly to Europe. It's very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I searched and I found this cheap flight, and I thought, there we go, cheap flight, that'll do me. Yeah, it's got a few waiting times. There's a few hours at airports, so I'll be okay. I'm young and stupid. And I flew into Guangzhou in China, and I think I might have had at least one stop before that.
So for listeners at home, that's Guangzhou.
Yeah, Guangzhou, yeah. Close enough.
You're
And
right.
it's implied. But yeah, I think I might have that was probably the second or maybe third stop, which, I don't know what direction I ended
That's a
up
fair
flying.
few between here and there.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was definitely the wrong direction
Doing
in
a
a
few
couple of
hops.
cases. But I walked into the airport and I thought, at the time I'd flown from sunny Queensland in basically summertime heat,
Yep.
and I was in shorts and a t-shirt, and I think I had a hoodie on, and because I was trusting, I checked in my bags,
Oh.
and the only thing I had on me was my suit because I couldn't really pack the suit, so I had just a suit and nothing else. And I walked into the airport and I thought, I've got a decent layover. I think it was there for maybe 6 or 8 hours. And I thought, I'll be okay, it's going to be cold here, but I'll be in an airport. As it turns out, the airport was not actually really indoors. It was kind of outdoors. So the windows along the airport were like slats, which were missing one in between.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else at the airport was wearing big duffel jackets and scarves and hats and everything else. And there was me standing in my shorts and t-shirt going, oh, this is going to be a very long 6 to 8 hours.
Oh dear.
So I actually ended up going and putting my suit on.
Yep.
So I'm walking out of the airport half dressed in a suit, just shivering. And I couldn't sit down because if I sat down, I just froze.
Yep.
So I just had to walk around and
moving.
around and around for 6 hours. I was never happier to get on a plane, I tell you. It was just misery.
A
But
nice
again,
cup of tea or something straight up, eh?
yeah, just pour it on my hands to try
Just
and
give me
defrost.
scotch. Don't want it on the rocks.
Just load me up. Yeah, it was. It's a lesson in preparedness. Always bring a jacket and maybe some pants.
100%. Be prepared. So if you were to give a bit of advice to someone getting into the adventure riding and travelling as you do it,
Yep.
what would it be?
Don't overthink it. Just buy a bike and go.
But make sure you got warm clothes.
Yeah. Don't follow my example.
Yeah,
but-
righto.
No, I definitely. I think a lot of people, and you'll see it now, coming out of the back of COVID, where people have been locked up in their sheds for too long. A lot of people have bought bikes and spent a lot of time and effort building them and putting accessories on and doing all this, and they didn't ride them. And
Yep.
now there's a lot of bikes coming up for sale that are brand new with all the gear on it that have never been used. You're better off just buy something and just go and ride it. Spend the money on fuel and memories. Make the memories. Not I love building stuff. I love tinkering and building things, and
No, I suppose it's your nature as an engineer.
Yeah, and it's
hands on.
pretty much what I do for a living now. So
Yep.
it's definitely, you can waste a lot of time in the shed too. As much as I love my shed, you're better off just get on the bike and go, or get on your 4-wheel drive, or book your hunting trip or
Yep.
camping trip. Just go and do it. Like, life is short. The more memories you make, the richer you are, I reckon. I've got a few memories I wish I could remember better, but I probably drink too much for that. Yeah. And that's exactly, it's probably, that applies to everything in life. You just, you can have a lot of ideas, but if you don't actually do anything with them, they're just ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You got to action them. You got
That's
to
it.
get out and do it. And a lot of people enjoy planning, and sometimes it can, things can get over planned.
Yep.
I just had a family holiday, and we overplanned overfilled it, and it's never been my way. That's why I like traveling for long periods of time, because I like the freedom of just going, deciding what you do and going where you want to go day to day.
Yep. And I touched on it too again in another episode with regards to equipment. You know, my good friend Barry, who I was talking about with regards to firearms, and Dave, who we dubbed the accountant from the movie. You know, Barry's has an affinity for tuning bows, and for yourself, probably doesn't know. You know, it's not like tuning a guitar, but in essence, it kind of is, where you have the components and you have strings on a bow, and you can have them at different lengths, and it's not about the harmony that they make and the noise that they put out, but it's about the way they work in synchronized fashion, so that the arrow comes out as cleanly, as efficiently as possible. And that's a bit of an art form in itself, and it's a very sort of technical, patience-bending undertaking to learn. And it's never something that I've had much of an inkling for. I've been a keep it simple, stupid. Yeah. If it goes where I point it, then I'm happy with the way it works. And that's just how I've operated, you know. And Dave, as I mentioned too, he's very particular with his firearms and getting them absolutely, you know, spot on in every little nook and cranny, so to speak. But I'm the sort of person who is, if it points where I need it to point, and if it shoots what I need it to shoot, then I'm happy with the way it works. And each to their own, but you know, I'm not an overthinker in that regard.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with keeping it simple, I think.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up, Keith.
Yep, sounds good.
Mate, much appreciate you taking the time out.
Yep, no problem at all.
And much appreciate the two ladies sitting here with their affinity for discussion. Absolutely, extremely.
Yep.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Our wine glasses are empty.
Subdued, I think.
They've really struggled to not be involved in conversation, which is unlike them at most of the occasions.
So can't wait to join in.
No, mate, appreciate it. And I'm sure that it's a really cool insight to a different part of outdoor life and a different adventure pursuit to.
Slightly different aspect, but also very similar in a lot of ways.
No, I think it's really cool, and I've I've been to quite a number of countries, but not quite the 7-0 mark. So
it's getting up there.
I think I'll be doing well to catch up to you.
Yeah, good luck.
got three or four to tick off for later in this year with some big travels in plan. So
that's the key. You just got to start.
Yeah, that's it. Got to go. Awesome. All right. Thanks heaps, mate.
No problem.
Cheers.
See ya.
Well, there you go. Episode 2 in the bank. I really hope you enjoyed that discussion with Keith. I think it was a really intriguing opportunity to delve into a slightly different slant to the outdoor pursuits than what a typical hunting style podcast covers. I think Keith made some really, really pertinent points there. Two of the things he said struck home with me. He said, make the memories. And he said, the more memories you make, the richer you are. And I don't think he could be any more correct. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you give us a like, give us a share, give us a follow, and that perhaps you took something away from it like I have. So get out there, enjoy the outdoors, get stuck into whatever it is that your pursuit is, and check in with us soon. And please get in touch and say g'day. Thank you very much, guys. Talk soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Hunting Repbulic Podcast. Catch you later.